Okay, we are in 2 Samuel chapter 3 today. The civil war in Israel has entered the time of the attrition. Who has got the most supplies, who has the most backers. Something similar to what we had in our country, except in our country, the North won. And in this, theoretically, the South won, because really David and his men really weren't the most supplied or the most supported, but he had a strong group of people. He had a core group, like the Marine Corps. Marine Corps ain't the biggest part of the armed forces in America, but they're a tight group. Not perfect, they have their flaws and they have turmoils in there, but they keep it in order. If there's turmoil, then they crack down on it. Because nobody's perfect, and they have to address it. So that's their thing. Same with David and his men. They're not perfect. David doesn't make all the right decisions, but God honors order. So when the leader makes a decision, they honor it. And so that's what we're going to get into today. There's a little bit of intrigue, a little bit of drama, a little bit of uprising. There's a turn now. There's going to be a sliding over from Israel to Judah, and there's going to be somewhat of an agreed-upon coup, if you would say, against the king, the P, because the general in Israel did something he shouldn't have done, and because of that, there was words, and he got angry, and blah, 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 and so we're going to get into that today. Once again, the Bible's not condoning any and all, simply is passing on the facts. Doesn't mean God condoned one side or the other, but one thing is for sure, one day David is going to be the king over all the nation of Israel, regardless of what goes down here. And it's going to happen in God's way, God's timetable. So here we go, 2 Samuel chapter 3, the war between the house of Saul and the house of David. Moved on, it was drawn out, and yet David grew stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul becoming weaker. The house of Saul was pretty much defeated. All they have a few of the household of Saul, and they are not powerful. They are not really the rulers. They're kind of puppets being manipulated by the military. Sons were born to David in Hebron, and we get a little bit of a genealogy. Firstborn, Ammon, by Ahinoam the Jezreelite. Second was Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. Third was Absalom, the son of Maacah. She was the daughter of a king of Geshur. Fourth, Adonijah, son of Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, son of Abital. The sixth was Ithream, by David's wife, Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. And so he had more sons and daughters. We don't get the full description here, but we're going to move on. During the war between the house of Saul and the house of David, Abner kept acquiring more power in the house of Saul. In other words, the general was kind of taking control, and the house of Saul they were like puppets. Now Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, daughter of Ahiah. And Ishbosheth, which was a son of Saul, and he was now the ruling king, questioned Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" Exactly, you should have not have been with Saul's concubine. To sleep with the former king's concubine was to put yourself in the next in line. Okay, so there was more intrigue here than just, he had a prostitute and Abner and Ishbosheth bumped heads. There was more to it here than that. We don't get the whole breakdown, but there was to go into a king's concubine was to indicate you were somehow going to be next in line for the throne. And all the noise you hear, the chains, it's not the reenactment of the Scrooge. It's It's a little mini bear that I have as our mascot. So it's not the Scrooge and Marley in chains. It's a mini bear. He's a mini bear mascot. Anyway, so Abner had a bumping of the heads, and there was a bit of a confrontation. And Ishbosheth and Abner now were divided. Abner was very angry about Ishbosheth's accusation, "Am I a dog's head who belongs to Judah?" Well, Ishbosheth was actually in the right here. Abner was wrong. The Bible doesn't give us the full dictation, just telling you once again the facts. He asks, "All this time I have been loyal to the house of your father Saul, to his brothers, to his friends. Haven't I handed you over to David, but the kingdom instead of David? And now you accuse me wrongfully with this woman." No, he wasn't accused wrongfully. He was accused rightfully. He did the wrong thing. He was asserting himself to the throne of Israel. "May God punish Abner and do so severely if I don't do for David what the Lord swore to him." Now that he has been kind of caught in his little scheme, he's a schemer. Schemers catch schemers. And eventually a schemer is going to catch him. "To transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and establish the throne of David over Israel and Judah from Dan to Beersheba." Ishbosheth could not answer Abner because he was afraid of him, obviously, because in all due respect, Abner was ruling the nation. So that's why he decided, well, I have enough power and clout, I can go into one of Saul's concubine, assert myself into the line of the throne of Israel. It's a lot of intrigue in this chapter. Good, bad, ugly. It's just, we're getting the facts. Abner sent messengers as his representative to say to David, "Whose land is it? Make your covenant with me, and you can be certain I am on your side to hand all Israel over to you." David replied, "Good, I will make a covenant with you. However, there is one thing I require. Bring Saul's daughter Michal here when you come to see me." Then David sent messengers to say to Ishbosheth, son of Saul, "Give me back my wife Michal. I was engaged to her for a price of 100 Philistine bratwurst." So Ishbosheth sent someone to take her away from her husband. Paltiel, son of Laish, her husband, followed her, weeping all the way to Bahurim, and Abner said to him, "Go back." So he went back. So David had paid the dowry. In that day, if you paid the dowry, she was your wife. So once again, Saul kind of did a schemer thing on David. But David's going to be one back at him and say, "I don't care. I'm taking her. I paid for her." And then she was kept pretty much to be a celibate from then on. He kept her, but didn't have normal relations with her as a husband and wife. Now we have the assassination of Abner. As I said, schemers do schemes on schemers, and they get back at one another. Kind of drug lords, which one can you trust? You can't. They'll both shoot off one another to get the most. Gangbangers killing off one another for the most, dope. Same here. Abner conferred with the elders of Israel. In time past, he wanted David to be king over you. Now take action, because the Lord has spoken concerning David through my servant David. And I will save my people Israel from the power of the Philistines and the power of all Israel's enemies. Abner also informed the Benjamites and went to Hebron to inform of Israel, the whole house of Benjamin, what Abner and the 20 came to David and related this message. In other words, Abner's about to transfer the kingdom over to David's hand, but Abner wasn't even the king, but he knew that he was kind of in command. The military was in control, and Ishbosheth, he was just a puppet. He was a little, he was like a big old puppet. He was controlled by the monies of the powers that be. In our country, they call it a lame duck president. The president just does what the powers and the monies, the world banks and the big monetary institutions start pushing him towards that direction. And that's what basically Ishbosheth was doing by Abner, who was actually controlling the country. So they held a little banquet, and Abner and David kind of joined and made some treatise, but not completely. So they've kind of made plans. But Joab doesn't really trust Abner. Abner killed one of his brothers, and Joab believes that Abner is a spy. We don't really know that he was or he wasn't. We don't, everything that was going to happen didn't play out as it should have because, like I say, schemers get the schemers. Abner said to David, "Let me now go, and I'll gather all Israel to my lord the king. They will make a covenant with you, and you'll rule over all you desire." So David dismissed Abner, and he went, and they had an agreement, a pseudo-agreement of sorts. To what extent, we're not really sure. Just then David's soldiers and Joab returned from a raid. They were bringing pillage and so forth, because Joab was kind of the leader of the military under David's control. Abner was not with David in Hebron because David had dismissed him and he had gone in after the agreement. When Joab and all his army arrived, Joab was informed. Abner, son of Ner, they made an agreement. The king dismissed him and they went off. Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Look here, Abner came to you. Why did you let him get away? You know that Abner, son of Ner, came to deceive you, to find out about your activities and everything you are doing." He was a spy. He was like a double agent. Double agents have caused a lot of damage in wars. In World War I, World War II, Vietnam. Double agents. The war in Iraq, Afghanistan. Sometimes you don't know what side they're on. And Joab left David and sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David was unaware of what was going on. When Abner returned to Hebron, Joab pulled him aside to the middle of the gateway, as if to speak with him privately, and there Joab knifed him, and Abner died in revenge for the death of Asahel, Joab's brother. So there was a state of war between the two nations. There really hasn't been a true accord, so there's still kind of combat in a consorted sort of way, in a broad sort of way, in a public, and in guerrilla warfare. It's still not quite over. Joab made this decision. David didn't even know about it. Later on, David feels remorse about it, and we kind of get to that story. David heard about it and said, "I and my kingdom am forever innocent before the Lord concerning the situation with Abner, son of Ner." So whether David agreed or didn't agree, he felt remorse because they had made a tentative agreement. And now he says Joab must answer for guilt or not guilt. It hangs over Joab's head in his father's house. May the house of Joab be without someone who has an infection or leprosy, or a man who can work a spindle, or someone who falls by a sword or staves. Joab and his brother Asahel killed Abner because he had put their brother Asahel to death in the battle of Gibeon. Now, take it for what it's worth. We don't really know. Joab did the right thing, did the wrong thing. David utters something in anger. How many of you have said something in anger you regretted later? All the bear paws in the world should go up, and that's where repentance comes to place. You say, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that." And so David's really angry about the situation. He utters out oaths, whether they're deserved or not. Once again, we don't really know. David then ordered Joab and all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourn over Abner." And King David walked behind the funeral procession. So David's going to go to the teetering brink of, I wasn't for this execution, this assassination. Joab did it by himself, and I'm not pleased with it. and I am angry with Joab for it. So he's giving the statement of whether we're missing something in the translation or not. He's giving the understanding that he was not for this, he is opposed to this, and because he had made a tentative agreement with Abner, he is going to say he had the blessing in my eyes and we had a plan, and Joab acted presumptuously. That's kind of the best way to put this. When they buried Abner in Hebron, the kings wept aloud at Abner's tomb. All the people wept, and the king sang a lament for Abner. Should Abner die as a fool dies? That's what David said. David didn't understand. But yeah, actually he did. He went into the king's concubine. Abner did die as a fool dies. He did. He was going to retract the war because he slept with the king's wife. He fornicated and committed adultery on the dead king's concubine, which would put him in place for the throne. So David was, whether he was aware of it, we don't know that David was aware of it. So should Abner die as a fool? Yeah, he did. He died. He committed adultery on the dead king's concubine. They were not to be touched. Your hands were not bound, your feet not placed in bronze shackles. You fell like one who falls victim to criminals. Yeah, he was a criminal. He committed adultery with the king's concubine. All right? And he's gonna go turncoat on Ishbosheth and Israel and give the kingdom over to David because he slept with a woman. So yeah, he died like a criminal. Quite frankly, he deserved to die like a criminal. But David had his reasons, okay? All the decisions David made weren't, God's decisions. They were his decisions. And sometimes he made good decisions. Sometimes he made bad decisions. But all in all, God says David was a man after his own heart. Why is that? Because David admitted when he sinned. David admitted, I'm going down the wrong direction. David had compassion, even on his enemy. And those things God loved. God loves a repentant servant. God loves a man that in the end, when all the heat has boiled down and the anger and the war and the battle and the tempers, he settles down and says, I was wrong. I was wrong. I respect a man like that. That in the end, he says, I was wrong. Not fighting to the death that he did the wrong thing. And claiming he ate and drank and wiped his mouth and did no wrong. I much more respect a man who says, yeah, I did wrong, and admits it. And God does, most importantly. So once again, we have a lot of intrigue here, a lot of, almost drama like soap opera. But things are working out, but eventually, regardless of all this, God is going to make David the king of Israel, and God's blessing is going to be on David. Then they came to urge David to eat bread while it was still day, but David took an oath, may God punish me and do so severely if I taste bread or anything else before sunset. All the people took note of this, and it pleased them. In fact, everything the king did pleased them on that day. All the troops and all Israel were convinced that the king had no part in killing of Abner, son of Ner. Then David said to his soldiers, you must know that a great man has fallen in Israel today. As for me, even though I am anointed king, I have little power today. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too fierce for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil. So there you have it. Take it for what it's worth. And Joab and his armies were highly part of David's successes. God would have brought success some other way if Joab and his brothers weren't there, but they were the spearhead of David's ascension to the throne and his survival in the wilderness. God used them mightily, but civil wars are ugly. I hate to think about the Civil War in our country. The division that it caused, it pitted cousin against cousin. When you got cousin against cousin and brother against brother, who can you really support. I mean, when how can you say he made the right decision? Either one? It's brother against brother. And Israel is the same way. It's like, man, that should have never happened, but it did. And so we move on next time in the history of Israel and David's slow ascension to the throne that God had already appointed for him. God bless you, friends. See you next time. Bye-bye.